The morning of May 29th, 1453, cannons thunder against the mighty Theodosian Walls. Smoke rolls across the Bosporus, and the fate of an empire hangs by a single stone. A Genoese merchant clutches his cloak and whispers like a gambler praying, "If the city stands tonight, pepper prices will dance once more on the docks of Venice." But imagine this. What if the gates of Constantinople never shattered? What if the crescent never replaced the cross above Hagia Sophia, and the city endured as the eternal capital of Byzantium? A hushed narrator leans in as though sharing a forbidden truth. If Constantinople had never fallen, would Europe have rushed to find new routes across the oceans? Would Columbus still have sailed? Or would the Americas remain untouched, waiting in silence? On the wharves of our alternate history, a Byzantine official smirks at a nervous Venetian captain. "Today's toll is reduced," the official declares, stamping a wax seal. "Our emperor wishes Europe to know there is no need for Cape of Good Hope when Constantinople keeps the way open." The captain laughs uneasily, and the sound carries over the Golden Horn like a warning bell for the future. In my notebook, a thought cuts like a blade. A city that survives a single day longer may rewrite centuries. And if you think that sounds impossible, wait until you see how the fate of the world unravels when Byzantium never falls. By the mid-15th century, the Byzantine Empire was a shadow of its former glory. Once stretching across the Mediterranean, by 1453 it had shrunk to a single jewel, Constantinople. Its triple walls still stood proud, but the empire behind them was hollow. The Ottomans, under the young and ambitious Sultan Mehmed II, encircled the city with a force nearly 10 times larger than its defenders. Inside the city, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos gathered priests, soldiers, and desperate citizens. The markets were bare, the treasury nearly empty. Still, the people prayed beneath the great dome of Hagia Sophia, convinced that this holy city could never fall. A soldier scribbled in his diary, "We are the last Romans. If these walls break, Rome itself dies with us." That thought haunted him as he gripped his spear and listened to the cannons pounding like the heartbeat of doom. Meanwhile, merchants from Genoa and Venice watched with cold calculation. They knew that if Constantinople fell, the Ottomans would control the vital trade routes between Europe and Asia. Spices, silk, and gold all would pass through Ottoman hands, taxed and restricted. That meant prices in Europe would soar. One Venetian captain muttered to another at the harbor, "If the city falls, our maps must change. Perhaps the Atlantic is not as wide as it seems." His companion shrugged, eyes fixed on the burning skyline. Better to risk the ocean than to pay the Sultan's price. And so, the fall of Constantinople was more than the end of an empire. It was the spark that pushed Europe into the age of exploration. With the old road to Asia blocked, kingdoms like Portugal and Spain poured money into ships, daring sailors to find another path. Out of this desperation, voyages were launched that would eventually discover new continents. In truth, 1453 was not just the death of Byzantium, it was the birth of the modern world. Now imagine the cannons of Mehmed II, roaring and failing. One misfire, one rainstorm, one miracle of engineering the Theodosian Walls hold. Reinforcements from Venice slipped through the Golden Horn at dawn, carrying food, gunpowder, and fresh troops. Suddenly, Constantinople does not fall. Inside the palace, Emperor Constantine XI stands over a map, his fingers trembling not with fear, but with defiance. Today, he declares to his council, "Rome lives again. We will not be the last emperors, but the first of a new age." The Genoese merchant who had been praying for his pepper trade wipes sweat from his brow. "By St. George, the market will survive. he whispers. In that instant, the economics of the world tilt. The Ottomans, humiliated, retreat to regroup. Instead of expanding into Europe, Mehmed must defend his shaken throne against rival warlords. Europe breathes easier, and Byzantium, long dismissed as a corpse, suddenly looks immortal. And here's where the comedy sneaks in. The Byzantine treasury, once bankrupt, begins filling again as trade routes reopen. Spices flood Venice, silks pour into Paris, and Portuguese explorers stare at their empty docks. One captain groans, staring at an unused caravel. So, do we just cancel the voyage? A fellow sailor shrugs. Who needs the ocean when Constantinople is giving discounts? In the shadows of this survival, the Renaissance still blossoms in Italy, but without the same urgency to look westward. The age of exploration, once inevitable, hesitates at the shoreline. The Americas remain a rumor, a whisper, nothing more. A thought lingers in the narrator's voice. When one city defies destiny, it doesn't just save itself, it bends the trajectory of the entire world. 1,450 seconds. 1,470 seconds. The rebirth of Byzantium. With the failed Ottoman siege, Constantine XI becomes the emperor who saved Rome. European states, shocked yet impressed, pour money and military aid into the empire. Venice and Genoa see an opportunity. As long as Byzantium holds, their spice trade thrives. The Byzantine court, once dusty and forgotten, buzzes again with scholars, artists, and engineers. Hagia Sophia resounds with hymns of triumph. A Venetian envoy bows before Constantine, saying with a grin, "Your Majesty, Europe thought you were dead. Now it seems you are the broker of the future." Constantine replies quietly, almost amused, "No, my friend, we were never dead. We were only waiting." 1,480 seconds, 1500s. The stalled age of exploration. In our timeline, Portugal sails around Africa, and Columbus crosses the Atlantic. But here, the urgency fades. Spices from India arrive steadily through Constantinople. Why gamble with stormy seas when the Roman toll road works fine? Ships like the Santa Maria rot in dry dock, while sailors grumble in taverns. So much for glory. The only thing we explore now is the bottom of a wine barrel. The Americas remain untouched, their civilizations developing in isolation, while Europe feasts on goods still funneled through the Bosporus. 1500s, 1600s. The Byzantine Renaissance. We picture Constantinople not as a city under siege, but as a glittering hub of art and science. With wealth restored, emperors sponsor universities, libraries, and grand cathedrals. Greek scholars who once fled to Italy now stay, fueling a cultural rebirth inside Byzantium itself. Instead of Florence, it is Constantinople that becomes the beating heart of the Renaissance. A young scholar notes in his journal, "The West looks to us now for wisdom. Once they called us Old Rome, now they call us New Athens." 1600s, 1700s, domino effects. Without exploration across the Atlantic, Spain never builds its global empire. Portugal remains a coastal trader, not a colonial giant. England and France lack the riches of the New World. Instead, power gravitates east, where Byzantium and its allies dominate trade. By 1700, a joke circulates among merchants. Want gold? Go east. Want power? Go east. Want trouble? Go west. There's nothing there but empty ocean. Foreshadowing. But every empire has cracks. As wealth surges, jealousy grows. Rival European powers, once content to let Byzantium guard the gates, begin to plot. And in the Ottoman court, whispers rise. The Sultan has not forgotten his humiliation. One day, he will return with vengeance. The citizen of Constantinople, a baker in the crowded market of the Meze Street, wipes flour from his hands and marvels at the crowds. Before, we sold bread to empty stalls. Now, spices from India, silk from China, and even Venetian wine pass through my shop. The city feels alive again. My son will not be a beggar, he will be a merchant. Inside his thoughts, however, lurks a quiet fear. The higher the city rises, the greater the fall if fortune turns. The Byzantine soldier. On the walls, a grizzled guard leans on his spear, recalling the day Mehmed's cannons failed. They called us the last Romans. Now, they call us the guardians of Europe. Funny thing, we still eat stale bread and wear dented armor. Only the speeches are new. He chuckles. But when the moonlight touches the battered stones of the wall, his mind whispers, "We were lucky once. Will we be lucky again?" The emperor and the court. In the palace, the emperor's advisors debate. One minister proclaims, "With the trade routes secure, we should rebuild the fleet and expand into the Balkans." Another scoffs. "Fool! Better to build schools and churches. Knowledge is the true power." Constantine XI listens, silent. His thoughts wrestle between ambition and survival. Am I the savior of Rome, or simply the man buying it time? The merchant's perspective. A Venetian trader raises a glass of wine in a Constantinople tavern. "Gentlemen, let us toast the emperor. Without him, we would be bankrupt explorers drowning off the coast of Africa. Instead, our ships grow fat with silk." The room bursts with laughter. Yet in the corner, a young Portuguese captain mutters, "And what of glory? What of discovery? We are rich, yes, but blind." Meta commentary. The narrator cuts in, almost conspiratorial. "If you think this harmony will last, wait. Prosperity is a jealous beast. Byzantium's survival has saved Europe's trade, but also stolen its hunger for exploration. And history never forgives stagnation for long. At first, the survival of Byzantium seems like a blessing, but history has a cruel sense of humor. The Americas remain unknown. Across the Atlantic, great civilizations like the Aztec and Inca continue to flourish. No Spanish conquistadors arrive, no smallpox pandemics sweep their cities, no galleons strip their gold. Instead, they expand in their own directions, building empires unbroken by European steel. By the 1600s, the Aztecs and Incas are trading with one another across vast highways and coasts, while Europe barely remembers these lands exist. A Spanish noble slams his fist on the table in Madrid. "Without colonies, we are nothing but another poor kingdom." His advisor replies with bitter humor, "Sire, the world is round, but we only walk in circles." The power balance in Europe. Without gold from the New World, Spain never becomes a superpower. England remains a modest island kingdom, its empire just a dream. France and the Holy Roman Empire squabble endlessly, while the true wealth flows east to Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire, once mocked as weak, becomes the broker of European politics. But this breeds resentment. A French ambassador sneers after yet another failed negotiation. So this is Europe now? We kneel before a Roman emperor who should have died 2 centuries ago? Asia's new role. In India and China, dynasties notice the change. Trade through Constantinople enriches them too, but without European ships probing their coasts, they remain dominant. The Ming dynasty closes its ports to outsiders, confident the world still comes to them through the Silk Road. The Mughal emperors of India grow stronger, their spices and jewels in higher demand than ever. The Ottoman shadow. And yet, across the border, the Ottoman Empire licks its wounds. Mehmed II's dream is broken, but his successors vow revenge. Generations of sultans tell their children bedtime stories, not of glory, but of humiliation. Remember, Constantinople was ours, and it will be again. Narrator's reflection. What began as the salvation of a single city has snowballed into a global rerouting of destiny. Europe never discovers America. Spain never rules the seas. The East remains the heart of the world. And all because one empire refused to fall. The Diary of a Byzantine Scribe. In the imperial chancery, a weary scribe dips his quill and writes by candlelight. Today I copied yet another trade treaty. Silk from Cathay, pepper from Calicut, cinnamon from Ceylon. I swear, the only thing Constantinople lacks is sleep. My fingers ache, my ink runs dry, and yet the emperor insists the empire is rising again. Perhaps it island, but if so, why am I still paid in bread? The merchant's advertisement. A Venetian merchant hangs a banner outside his stall. No need to sail the ocean. Finest spices through Constantinople cheaper than risking your life at sea. Passers-by laugh, one muttering, "If Columbus had seen this, he'd have stayed home and opened a spice shop." The Portuguese captain's memoir. A frustrated sailor in Lisbon pens his memories. Our ships were ready, our sails mended, our hearts burning for discovery. But when Byzantium reopened the gates, the king cancelled our voyage. I drank myself stupid instead of steering for the horizon. Sometimes when I see the gulls flying west, I wonder what could have been. The Ottoman court jester. In Istanbul, even humor carries bitterness. A jester jokes before the Sultan. "My lord, why try to conquer Constantinople again? Perhaps we should tax the pigeons instead. At least they do not have Italian reinforcements." The hall erupts in laughter, though everyone knows the Sultan's smile is thin. The scholar's reflection. A Greek philosopher in the city writes a letter to a friend in Florence. "You Italians boast of your Renaissance, but here in Constantinople, we live it every day. Knowledge flows like the Bosporus itself. The West dreams of discovery, but we hold the world in our hands." Narrators aside. History is not only written by kings and generals. It is scribbled in diaries, whispered in taverns, laughed at by jesters, and printed on cheap banners. And in this alternate world, those voices echo with both triumph and irony. By the 1700s, Byzantium has grown impossibly rich. Gold pours into Constantinople, the markets overflow, and the empire declares itself not just the heir of Rome, but the master of Europe. The spark. A French ambassador, insulted by Byzantine arrogance, storms out of the palace shouting, "Better to drown in the Atlantic than bow to an emperor 2 centuries past his death." In Paris, pamphlets circulate mocking the Byzantines. Drawings of emperors sitting on piles of pepper sacks, wearing crowns shaped like garlic cloves. The absurd war of spices. Soon tensions explode. France, Spain, and England form an alliance to break the monopoly of Constantinople. They call it the Crusade of Spices. Their armies march east, but instead of swords, they carry barrels of nutmeg, hoping to crash the market. In a surreal twist, the Byzantine army responds by launching catapults filled with cinnamon sticks and cloves. On the battlefield, soldiers sneeze uncontrollably as clouds of spice fill the air. A French general gasps mid-charge. "Mon Dieu, they are weaponizing the bakery." The Ottoman gamble. Seeing chaos, the Ottomans finally return, hoping to reclaim the city after 2 centuries of humiliation. But instead of leading armies, the Sultan sponsors an underground movement, smuggling pepper through Anatolia to undercut Byzantine trade. A furious merchant in Constantinople rages in the marketplace. counterfeit pepper. They even mixed sand into it. The empire will collapse, not by sword, but by seasoning. The emperor's dream. In desperation, the Byzantine emperor unveils his ultimate plan: to build the world's first super spice road, a highway stretching from Constantinople to India, paved with marble and guarded by soldiers wielding ladles. He proclaims, "With this road, the world will bow not to explorers, but to chefs." The narrator pauses, half laughing, half terrified. And so the world, instead of discovering America, nearly destroys itself in a war fought with kitchen supplies. When the smoke of the spice wars clears, the world looks nothing like ours. A Byzantine-centered world. Byzantium emerges battered but unbroken, its coffers still full from centuries of controlling the trade routes. Constantinople is not just the capital of an empire, it becomes the world's market. Embassies, merchants, and scholars all converge on its marble streets. People joke that if you sneeze in the Hagia Sophia, the echo carries to Beijing. Europe without America. Spain never becomes a superpower. England never builds an empire across the seas. France remains a continental power, always scheming but never rich. The Americas thrive untouched, their civilizations evolving independently by 1800. The Aztec and Inca empires rival Byzantium itself in size and sophistication. A world of spices, not colonies. Instead of colonies, European powers fight endless trade wars. Armies clash not for land, but for cinnamon contracts and nutmeg monopolies. Scholars in universities argue seriously about whether pepper should be treated as currency. Modern echoes. Fast forward to the present. Instead of McDonald's spreading across the globe, it is the Byzantine Spice Company. Tourists don't visit Times Square in New York. That city never rose. They crowd the Golden Horn to snap photos of the pepper exchange. A travel blogger writes in his journal, "Constantinople is the center of the world. They say America is a myth, just a story told by drunk Portuguese sailors who dreamed too far." Narrator's reflection. And so, a single twist, one city that refused to fall in 1453 has redrawn the world. No Columbus, no global empires, no rush across the oceans. Instead, humanity lives in a world where the future was not forged by explorers, but by traders, scribes, and spice merchants under the domes of Byzantium. Perhaps the true lesson of this alternate world is simple. History doesn't always turn on battles or kings, but on peppercorns and cinnamon sticks. A cannon misfires, a wall holds, and suddenly the age of exploration never leaves the harbor. The narrator leans closer, voice wry. Maybe the strength of Byzantium wasn't in its soldiers or emperors, but in its ability to make Europeans pay a toll and still come back smiling. Perhaps the true power of empires lies not in conquest, but in the patience to run the world's most profitable spice rack. And if that sounds absurd, remember so does most of history. And that's our journey through a world where Byzantium never fell. A world without Columbus, without America, and with far too much nutmeg. If you enjoyed exploring this what-if timeline, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It keeps this channel alive and helps us dive into even stranger corners of history. Remember, history is full of turning points, but alternate history is where we get to play with them. Until next time, keep questioning the past, because the smallest change can rewrite the entire world.